Welcome everyone to the fourth and last installment of the medium format experience. Thank you for joining us for an hour or a little bit more than that on your Thursday evening. We can't thank you enough for tuning in and being a customer, being a supporter of Capture Integration. We appreciate it greatly, but we also appreciate the wonderful talent that we have here tonight. And so I want to invite the talent that we have. So Phil Bekker, could you say hello? I think we're muted, Phil. How about Antonio? Can you say hello? All right. We got two mutes. There you go. All right. We have John Loomis as well. John.
Everybody, happy holidays.
Great. And we have support all the way from across the pond, which is amazing.
Do you want Chris from Hasselblad?
Is it Chris from Hasselblad?
Chris from Hasselblad, yep.
Chris from Hasselblad, great.
Hi, everyone.
This is Antonio here. I was on mute. How are you?
Great, we got everybody off of mute. Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. So appreciate it. We're gonna be informal and try to make it as smooth tonight and smoother than we've been so far. I'll introduce myself. My name is Dave Gallagher. I own Capture Integration. I'm the old guy. I feel like it in the group tonight. I'll invite and introduce the other old guy on the other side.
I'm Steve Hendricks. I'm also with Capture Integration. Been here 12 years working with Dave. And I'm old. I'm an old guy, I guess.
12 years is pretty awesome. You've been here. So 12 years, and how long have you been here, sir?
6 years.
6 years. And yourself?
I'm Brad Kay. I am head of technical support here. So I play with toys and tell other people how to play with toys. We play with toys together.
And we all have a different take. And I think all of our talent and photographers that are here versus us, we all have a different take on the products that we shoot and we know. And I think it'd be very interesting how we all have a different feeling on the products tonight. So how we're going to start, now that we have the introductions, we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of Hasselblad. And I'm going to hand it over to Steve to talk about the history of Hasselblad.
Okay, well, thanks, Dave. You see what this is? This is actually a notepad. I've got it typed out because we've done this is the fourth one we've done now. We've done medium format experiences with Phase 1 and with Fuji and Leica and now Hasselblad. And Hasselblad is one of those really iconic, truly an iconic company in our industry that goes back a long way. And so we don't have but like an hour, so I'm not gonna. I could spend like 5 hours on their history, but I'm gonna skim it a bit because they go back to 1841. So I'm going to read this because there's just too much for me to memorize. So 1841, Hasselblad began as a trading company. Fritz Victor Hasselblad and his son, Arvid Victor Hasselblad, and his son liked photography. And so from that trading division, he started a photographic division. And he said, I certainly don't think that we will earn much money on this, but at least it will allow us to take pictures for free. And so I'm like, we can relate to that. Right? I think we make a little bit of money, but we also get to take pictures for free. So that's kind of cool, just like Victor. Let's see, so that's 1841, 1888. Arvid met with George Eastman from Kodak, and Hasselblad became the exclusive Swedish distributor for Kodak products. 1908, the photographic division being so successful is spun off as Fotografiska AB. Victor Hasselblad had disputes with his family. He spun off his own business in 1937 and opened a photo store in a lab called Victor Photo in Gothenburg in Sweden. Now let's jump to World War II. In World War II, the Swedish government approached Hasselblad to make aerial cameras, and Hasselblad made 342 aerial cameras between 1941 and 1945 for the Swedish military. So there's you know, where we are today with Hasselblad is obviously there's a lot of things that happened between now and when they started. 1942, Carl Eric Hasselblad died, and Victor took control of all Hasselblad photographic endeavors. And Victor really wanted to make high quality civilian cameras. And so some of the early models were, this is starting around 1948, the 1600 series, which was an advanced camera, but not particularly reliable. The SWA with the legendary 38 millimeter bygone camera came out in this period of time. The 1000F was another model that was a little more reliable than the 1600, so it was a step forward. But it wasn't really until 1957 when you had the 500C launch, which kind of began what we know of Hasselblad as that iconic company today. And that 500C was what they call the V series, was continually evolved through 2013 with the 503 SWA. And that was the last of the V series. And so that's kind of an introduction to the traditional company Hasselblad. Now in 1976, Victor Hasselblad sold his company to a Swedish investment group. And that company has continued through today with a variety of different ownership groups over the years. And today they're owned majority-wise by DJI, who is also a strategic partner for Hasselblad. And that was just 2 years before Victor Hasselblad died. So he maybe he knew what was going to happen, and he was like preparing everything so the company could continue and go forward. I should mention in 1998, they partnered with Fuji and created the X-Pan camera, which is a 6x17 panoramic camera. And in 2002, that's when they began the H system. So the H system, which is where this camera right here evolved from, started with film cameras that digital backs could attach to the back of. And so you had the H1, the Hasselblad H1, you had the Hasselblad H2, and so let me piece this together, right? In 2004, so Hasselblad was actually working on creating a digital camera internally. And now a lot of this is coming from, Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because
You're doing well so far.
a bunch of this is coming from Wikipedia. So they had that as a project, and they killed the project because they didn't feel it was going to be profitable for them. And so what they did then, there was a company called Shiro, which was an investment group that acquired, because they were owned by, at that time, I guess, they were the investment owner for Hasselblad. And they acquired Imicon, which was a maker of high-end scanners, the flex tight scanners. And at that time, up to that point, I was actually employed by Imicon. So this is where I have some personal involvement with this whole situation, and really introduced me to a lot of the people that work with Hasselblad even still today. But it was, Imicon made the film scanners, and just shortly before that acquisition, Imicon had purchased a company called Color Crisp. And Color Crisp made digital backs called the Carnival digital backs. These were 4 and 6 megapixel digital backs that were, competing back in the 90s with the Leaf Polaris and the CNR digital backs and the phase light phase, those kind of backs. So at this point, Hasselblad then had a digital solution. That's kind of where they got there with that. And they began a series of cameras, starting with the H1D, which were digital versions of the H system. And they went H1D, H2D, H3D, H4D, H5D. This is an H60 today. And so there was some controversy in the H line too, because the H1D, all the D cameras were proprietary Hasselblad back, Hasselblad front, because you had the H1 and the H2, and other companies like Phase One, Leaf, CNR could put digital backs on those cameras. And when they came out with the H1D line, that stopped, and they continued with a product called, they came out with an H2F, which was a film camera. You're smiling because you remember this.
I remember
right?
the F. I remember what
Yes.
we called the F. Yeah.
Yes, they added a letter to it because that camera could take film backs, and you had the H2D, which could take the Hasselblad digital backs, and all the other digital back makers were suddenly, hey, where's our camera to put our digital back on? And so the result of that was some legal proceedings, which ended up with Hasselblad continuing to make independent film cameras, starting with the H4X. So H4X, H5X, H6X, those are still being produced today. H6X as a camera that a phase one or other makers digital back go on to, and that resolved that.
What is significant about the Hasselblad side, though, is that when the 500 series was out, right, it was dominant in the marketplace by far, right? When the H series came out, it quickly took over the 645 marketplace and became dominant in the marketplace for 645. We had Contacts, we had Mamiya, we had other 645, but when it came in, the optics were superior, the combination of the feel of it, there's so many things that dominate. And so don't discount, or you shouldn't discount how amazingly dominant those two lines were at the time when they came out.
Right.
Hence, that's why H1, H2, all the way to H6. So it was
Yeah,
pretty
you had
significant.
rental houses that rented out that product. If someone wanted medium format, they wanted a Hasselblad H camera and a digital back on the back of it.
Lifestyle shooters in the Hasselblad H series, they're just completely dominant in the marketplace.
So that really with the H system takes us to around 2016, and today it's still sold as a current product. There are 50 and 100 megapixel solutions, and there's even a multi-shot solution which combines pixels and creates an equivalent 400 megapixel file with true RGB separated color. So there's a lot of pretty impressive elements in the H series line, but that's where things stand today. It's current product. One question I'll have for Chris certainly is there gonna
Lots of questions for Chris.
but is that will there be further development of that line? And we'll see if there's information on that. But in 2016, Hasselblad really went into a different direction and branched into the sub $10,000 category of medium format cameras, and they introduced the X1D camera. And this was a sub $10,000 camera that didn't have the big sensors that the H system had, like with the 100 megapixel sensors, 54 millimeter by 40 millimeter, but it's still bigger than 35 millimeter sensors. And that came out in 2016, 2019, you had an X1D2. And in 2019, you also had the Apollo edition, special edition of the 907X, which was a digital back that could go on a lot of different things. Had a front end that replicated the front of the X1D, so it could take the X1D autofocus lenses, but could also go onto an old 500 series Hasselblad, could go onto a digital back. And then about a year ago or so, they came out with a Chrome edition of that, which they think of as the standard edition, and that's where we are today, with cameras that are now below $7,000 for a medium format Hasselblad camera system. And that's the history. There's more to it, but trying to sketch through it.
Yeah, that's a lot of history, right? There's so much history. We could go spend all night going deeper, but you did a great job, Steve. And there's so much to talk about. And Chris, anything else you want to add about the history of Hasselblad?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up. I think also from we had a lot of input for aerial type work from the early cameras, and obviously, modified 500s. NASA was involved there, obviously, on that side. So a lot of technical knowledge was picked up there in terms of what works, what doesn't. So I think, as you say, there's a huge amount of history, huge amount of history.
You mentioned the space program either.
Yeah, never mind it being on the moon.
Right.
Oh,
that too.
Yeah,
I think there were Hasselblads in space into the early 2000s up on the ISS and so on. So it's been around for a long time, doing a hard job. The V system. Well, we're always so surprised how many are still going, how many people are still using them. I mean, we can see from the CFE sales that, that digital back just feels a need for people they can just use that V system, keep on going.
And we're going to definitely go over that next in our next section. So thanks, Chris. So we're going to now, just as we always do at Capture Integration, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of all the products. We're going to start with a good feature of the product line, and each one of us is going to talk about what our good feature, our great feature, our favorite features are, and talk about things that could be used in improvement. Any of you guys want to volunteer to go first on good feature?
I always go first. Why is that?
Brad, you go first. You haven't talked yet.
All right. My good feature is the ergonomics of this camera. As a full frame medium format camera, this is really easy in the hand. It feels really good. This is actually the first medium format camera digital that I shot. I actually shot the H series with a Nemicon digital back to start with. Steve actually introduced me to that back in 2005 or so.
Ago.
And then I moved on to shooting the H3D 39 multi-shot, which was invaluable at the time. I was shooting carpet, and the ability to have those individual frames shot, that the texture of that carpet was just amazing in 39 megapixel, no moire, no problems. So I got to play with this camera way back, and I still really love it from the standpoint of an in-hand medium format camera. For a full frame camera, it feels really good even when you've got a big lens on it. So that's my good feature.
Completely agree. Ergonomics, to me, probably the best medium format camera becomes ergonomics. Yeah, absolutely. So my good feature is the quality of the XCD glass. Surprised, I have to tell you, because some of these lenses are really small, but after you shoot them, you realize, wow, they're packing a punch. And so here is the 80 on a camera that I use a bunch, right? Isn't that, or that's the 21? I get the 80 over here.
80.
So here's the 81.9, and look, the 21 actually looks very similar to it. But a 1.9 in medium format, right? And don't discount the quality of this XCD glass. And then being able to put an adapter on these and use my HC glass too. That combination to me is a really good feature.
Chris, I lost the name of the company that makes the XCD lenses now, or where they're made. Can you?
Japan. So basically, the XCD, it's Nito in Japan make the lenses for us. And obviously, the number of lenses that are in the range, I mean, this is one of the things that we'll come to a bit later on, but basically we're adding more and more focal lengths, and from the 1.9s to the sort of compact 45Ps and so on. So we're trying to add to this system to make it into a full, to be as big as the H system got with its numbers of lenses. So, because we started off originally with the X1D with only 3 lenses was the original launch, and we've had to build from there.
You're up for good feature.
My good feature would be sort of related to the lenses, because these lenses are leaf shutter lenses, meaning that there's shutters inside the lenses, and for none of these bodies is there a focal plane shutter. And most of us that shoot 35 millimeter know that those are focal plane shutter cameras. There's medium format camera systems that have focal plane shutters, but the Hasselblad does not. So it dispenses with that, and all the lenses are leaf shutter. And that means that leaf shutter being in the lens, they can sync much faster with strobe than a focal plane shutter. Most focal plane shutters sync at 1/125th to 1/200th. But the leaf shutters in the Hasselblad lenses go to up to 1/2000th of a second syncing with strobe. And that just opens up a whole bunch of important and creative opportunities for photography to be able to sync at that camera speed, that shutter speed. And if you're not that familiar with leaf shutter lenses and what they can do, today we have strobe systems that have sort of a way of allowing you to sync at faster speeds by kind of peppering the light and creating that effect. But you have some disadvantages. You lose power there, and there's some other disadvantages too. So there's a great article that Brad here has written on our website about leaf shutters, and he's done a comparison that you can see like what happens when you try to use, like, say, high-speed sync with strobe versus using a real mechanical leaf shutter lens. And so if you go to our website, go down to the bottom, Brad's got a link for all his articles, and it's, I think, currently second or third article. So look that up.
Yeah, leaf shutters are invaluable for commercial photographers, especially when if your sets are more dynamic, that you have to show up to a location and control it quickly, and you don't have a grip truck and a crew blacking things out for you. The leaf shutter allows you to adapt to a situation very quickly.
And the fastest sync at 1/2000 all medium format.
Yeah.
By far. I mean, its competitor, some of them are at 1/25 and stuck at 1/25, and that is a huge fallback. And the problem with that one, again, for our professionals. And so having that option to go to 1/2000 is tremendous. All right, so now we're to great features. Actually, no, good. Yeah, great features. Who's got great feature first?
Well, I actually exchanged good and great because I originally thought I was going to say this was great and Focus Mobile was good, but after working with it this week again, I think it's great. I think Focus Mobile 2 is the nicest iOS sort of companion to these cameras. Literally, like, you don't need a manual or anything. And that's what's nice about all of this user interface is you turn the camera on, you turn that app on, the app found the camera right away and said, do you want to do this? And you say, yeah. And then the camera's connected, and you can use the app to remote fire the camera, or you can use it traditionally to fire the camera and see the results on the app. So it's really beautiful. It works really well, and it's really simple. Zero instructional manuals necessary. It's all very clear what.
And it moved up to great feature.
Yeah, I really like it quite a lot.
Again, compared to some of its competitors that don't have a mobile app at all.
Right.
And you have to throw that out there. Give them props. It's easy to use. It's simple. The layout is great.
Yeah.
It works.
Well,
and
the
it's
layout
all
is
great things.
very cohesive
Mhm.
with the rest of the user interfaces on these cameras. So it just makes sense as you play with it.
Well, I'm gonna go with my great feature then next, Steve. I'm the old guy that loves my 500 series. Right? So here's my 500 series camera. I was teaching my younger guys, here's the dark slide, and here's how the PAL pin works, and everything about cranking the lens and cocking it, how to put it on the camera today. It felt really good using my 500 series again. Well, I love that I then can take this off, right? So let's put it on, let's put the dark slide on, and then take this little guy and put it on my 500 series. So being able to have my 500 series back to life, I can't tell you how it makes me happy having the 500 series back to life. And so this 907, look at this, look at the size, look at the design, right? It looks like my film holder. It brings me joy. And there's something to say about that, right? If the camera brings you joy by using it, if you want to pick it up and use it again, if it makes me want to grab, right, put it on my 500 series and bring my 500 series to life again. That makes me happy, and to be able to shoot like I was shooting before. And so look at that design. Look at how it integrates into it. It's as beautiful to me. That's art, but it's as beautiful a part of photography as there is. And to be able to take, I had a client come in, and I can't remember what, about 10 years ago, and it wasn't a client. It was an old instructor from my alma mater, RIT. He had just retired, and so I adored him at RIT. He retired. He brought his 35-year-old Hasselblad in and was able to put a digital back on his old Hasselblad, and we shot it immediately, and it all synced and it all worked, and he left with it, and it was such a satisfying thing for me. The old and the new, my old instructor coming here and putting it on, this makes me happy. And so that integration by having a 907 and put on my 500, I just can't say enough about it, that if you have a product that brings you that much joy in shooting it, then that's a success. Can you tell it like it?
Yeah, and what's changed since that that professor came in is like with this solution, you don't have any cable.
No
or
cables.
anything.
No cables.
You have the
No,
direct,
just works.
just like it belongs on the back of it.
Mhm.
So my great feature is kind of similar. It's really about the design aesthetics of these cameras that Hasselblad makes, and they've really always kind of been known for this with that 500 series camera, like Dave says, but they've kind of continued it, especially with these new products like the X1D and even the digital back. Just looks nice, but I'm kind of focused on this camera here in terms of what I really like about it. I mean, it's just a beautiful camera, and the feel of it, the materials that they used you can just appreciate them. You can appreciate that it doesn't look like another version of every other camera that's out there in the world. And a lot of my clients will tell me that's why they choose cameras a lot of times is, all things being equal, they want a camera that inspires them, that, brings them some joy, that they feel great about picking it up off their shelf and going out and shooting with. And you definitely get it with that camera. There's just so many little details, even this the button there and the sound it makes, and maybe you even like the orange shutter button. I don't know. I do. Someone had to
How's that
choose
thumb
that.
wheel?
And any
How's that come
buttons
There's
that hurt your
there's no
thumbs?
joystick.
No joystick that
There's no
hurts?
joystick.
No.
So my fingers are unscathed when I use it.
Orange is the new black, Steve.
Yeah. So yeah, I like the design. I like that there's a camera company that still wants to make a unique and a different looking and feeling and operating camera than all the other cameras. That's similar to, they're the anti-modern auto industry, where all the vehicles we buy today, all, if you don't look at them closely, they can all look like the same car. And you look back at older vehicles and you see all the design that went into them, and that's just been lost. And with cameras, you could say kind of a similar thing. But here's one company that bucks that trend and puts their design out front.
There's cameras that you pick up and they're so light and plasticky,
Mhm.
right? And you're like, oh, that's a nice little toy. This isn't a toy. You feel this camera, it feels right. It feels like the right weight. The glass is superior. There's so much about it to like. It doesn't feel like some of those other ones up there. They're like, oh, isn't this cute? This isn't cute. This is a camera, a real camera.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination of a camera that for a medium format is so small and light,
Mhm.
yet it doesn't feel plasticky, that you feel the quality of the material. Like this is real,
Pick it up, you want to shoot it.
Yeah.
All right, so then we're gonna have to go and talk about some of our pet peeves. And so we are fair to everyone. We've been pet peeves and needs improvement features with everybody. So now we have to hit Hasselblad as well. So Brad, since you've been going first, we're gonna hand it to you.
Okay, so as much as I like the mobile focus 2 for iOS, I have loathed the desktop focus for a long time. And I shot it when I was shooting the Emicon, and it was basically this program that it felt like it was made by engineers for engineers, and you had to do things in a very specific order, or you'd get lost in a loop or something wouldn't work right. And then a few years back, it turned black and beautiful, and it matched this camera and had the orange button. I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go. And it was the same thing, only pretty. So from a standpoint of program to browse your raw files and to do your live view and all that sort of stuff, it's not my favorite. Now I have to share that burden of my other little pet peeve, which is the way the hood's attached to the lenses, that it's not a thing you can do blind.
Oh, and if you do it blind, you're gonna put it on wrong.
I like it.
Do not blind.
Right.
And then
Right.
try to get it off if you do
Right,
that.
yeah. You can put it on the wrong way and
Don't
it
do
might be stuck there for a while,
Yeah.
or you might break it as you try to take it back off. So that's a pet peeve, that I can't have my attentions on other things as I'm buttoning my kit back up and put it, getting lens caps and hoods and everything back in order. It's something you have to pay attention to, line up those lines and get it set right.
Yep. So one of my little pet peeves goes along with your pet peeve to compliment, but it's not really Hasselblad's fault. If Hasselblad connected to Capture One, I would be so darn happy, right? Whether tethering or whether they could take the raws and put it in Capture One. So to Capture One out there, if you guys want to make more money and more profits, open up your doors to Hasselblad. Period. Right. I'm gonna pick up these cameras every time, so many times in certain situations, because I can take the raws and go and Capture One. And so that's not a Hasselblad issue. That is a Capture One issue. So get over it, Capture One, and open it up. Then my pet peeve has to go back to my 907. Love it. Got my waist level on. I'm shooting horizontal. I need to go vertical. Right. I got to do this. Right. So the Hasselblad is a square format, historically square format, designed for square format. So now that I have a sensor on it that's no longer square, I can't take my sensor and twist it on this because of the beautiful design. So the question was, do we take the beautiful design away and flip it, right? Or do we keep the design and have to put it on the side? So in order to go shoot vertical, I've got to put a 90 on it, and a PM90 or PM45 works. It's still a little wonky with the PM45. So that's my little pet peeve.
Yeah, there's only two ways they can solve that, right? Which is they have to have dual interfaces on two sides, or they could have a square large sensor, which would be nice.
Or you could say, Dave, hush up and put it back on this body and shoot it vertical on this body, right? Because it works beautifully here, right? And just you're talking about only on your 500 series, but it works beautifully vertical here, which comes with it, and the lenses are great. So maybe it's my issue.
No. Mine is as much as I love so much about the cameras today in the industry, there's some things that we've gotten to where we take for granted now, and I'd like to see some of those things get incorporated and stepped up in the Hasselblad cameras. Camera body stabilization would be one of those, because the cameras that do have that, when I shoot with them, I mean, it's really a game changer to suddenly be shooting at a 20th of a second with a long lens and getting tack sharp results. And, if I'm shooting with the X1D, that's a mirrorless body. And just that alone helps, because you don't have the mirror to contend with. But, body stabilization would be a great thing to have in there. And almost every other camera in the industry has it. And another thing I'd like to see would be the EVF, having a higher res EVF. I think part of this is, when I see some of the things that are incorporated into the Hasselblad camera, like Hasselblad is not a company, say like Fuji would be an example, where they have a whole line of smaller format cameras with advanced tech that they already are used to. And for them, it's probably not that challenging to bring that technology into the medium format system. But Hasselblad maybe doesn't really have that. So their challenge is a little bit greater, but I'd still like to see that. And the EVF is one thing I'd certainly like to see upgraded, because a good example would be Leica, which to me has some similarities with Hasselblad. And you look at a product like the SL2, which has got a 6 million dot EVF, it's industry leading. So it's not that a company that is that type of company can't have that kind of industry leading tech built in their camera. So, everything works great, but I'd like to see that incorporated. That's my pet peeve.
All right. I don't think that was too bad. We're pretty lenient on Hasselblad. All right. Let's get into our favorite feature then. Brad, what's your favorite feature?
The user interface on these cameras is, I think, maybe the nicest in the world. It's so pleasing, and it's so self-evident how you navigate. Again, I've never even looked at a PDF of a manual for these cameras, because.
So you're saying you're a man and never read the directions? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I read directions all the time, and with certain cameras, I have to, because I can't figure out where the things are on it. Not so for this. It's so wonderfully precise in the way where they've lodged the individual variables to change makes sense. you know, like maybe I'm off on one, I'll go like, is that under the gear or is that right here? And it'll just be, no, it's not there, it's there. And I find it. And also just the way it integrates between the touch screen and then still having the wheels, the tactile wheels, so you can enable a screen just to get to it, to see it big, and then be able to switch it with your fingers and not have to navigate on that screen. I like the ability to do both, and this seems just very, very well designed, and it's the same between these cameras. So you know, you learn one, you know the other.
Right. And I've got to tell you, most of the time we don't overlap, right, with our favorite and our best and our good features. I think this one was something we needed to overlap with, because we sell all medium format digital cameras, right? We have them all on the shelf for us to pick up and use. We have to know all the interfaces of all the medium format cameras. And there's some of them that I have to still Google on how to get to the 4th layer menu down to find out how to change this lens feature, right? And it's something that is so irksome, I can't explain, right? Or the format card is 3 levels down in a personal user interface, right? There's so much. This is by far the best GUI, the best interface of any digital camera. And I'm saying that with all the DSLRs, with all the smaller format, large format, everything. There's never been a better graphic user interface of any camera ever made than the Hasselblad graphic user interface, period.
It kind of shocks me a little bit how bad almost all the camera interfaces are in our industry, and how they have really not changed much at all. I mean, because this goes back years and years and years and years. And so this interface just jumps out as, okay, yeah, this is how we would put in modern times and all the
Right, thank you. But it's a big thank you.
Right.
Someone did it right. They did, how do I mean, they all had a chance to, they all had a way to re-engineer the camera system. And then Hasselblad, but did it not even right. They did it so much far better than anyone else. So our superior, that it's shocking to me, not how far number 2 is behind Hasselblad. That's how good it is. Okay, sorry. Over to you.
So my favorite feature is, and I have a habit of this, but I'm gonna go back to it. I'm gonna talk about color again, because I talked about that with Leica last time. But part of this is from my clients that feed back to me and say what they like about a product. Part of it is me shooting it and kind of seeing what's going on with this product. And with Hasselblad, over and over again, I hear about the color being the driving force behind their pleasure in the camera, their decision to buy it. And I feel like color is the overestimated feature of a product, because people tend to think of color as something they can correct. And I don't really agree. And when you look at the files from this camera and you compare it to other cameras, you can see what's going on, and you can see why that's not as simple as it sounds. But what happens with the Hasselblad file is that it's a really amazing way of, how do I describe this? The whole scene just blends, right? In a certain way where the colors just look right. And when I look at other files from most other cameras, I see like, well, that part is right, but they look like parts of a whole, elements in the scene, like just shooting out there today with our courtyard, where there's brick wall, there's some green leaf stuff, there's cement sidewalk, etc. There's that weird blue color staircase. Like, Hasselblad just makes all those colors look right. And the other camera I was shooting with was like, well, that door frame looks right, but the brick wall looks like it's a whole different kind of color balance. Green leaves are a little heavily saturated, you know, it just doesn't flow together. And so it's not like, well, how do you correct that? If you don't like that color, how do you correct that? Well, what do I do? You can say you can correct, like if you shoot a product like a can of Coke, can you correct that to make that a better red that you like? Yeah, it's like one color, but a complex scene is totally different. And Hasselblad gets it right out of the camera. And the files are also they're not contrasted. People talk about they feel like a film kind of file. They're not so digital looking, and that's true. And I have to say a little bit about focus, because I've looked at Hasselblad files. I've changed the metadata so that I can bring them into Capture One, and I use Capture One to convert them. And it's not fair because I'm using a phase one 50 megapixel profile. So it's not really apples to apples, but also I can take these files and bring them into Adobe. And Adobe is sort of close to Focus, but it's just not there. And Focus has something. So I've almost come to peace with Focus a little bit, where it's like, you know what? Partly, here's the thing, is that people that don't like Focus, often it's they're used to Capture One or something else.
Yep.
And it's more about familiarities. Is it as good a program as Capture One? No, it probably isn't, but it's probably better than people realize. And when you look at the results that you get out of Focus, I grit my teeth and I go ahead and bring those files into Focus. And I maybe don't do a lot, but I want that conversion in Focus because you get the quality of that file and it looks great.
Awesome. Awesome. Chris, what do you think
Yep.
about our goods, our greats, our favorites, and our pet peeves?
Well, I think, to be honest, you've hit the nail on the head. You know, if let's start with the good stuff. I think the design, the interface, the materials, if you like, that we use. It's been a big thing. Even, you know, H-System, you know, it's always been a well-built camera. But H6D, same basic touchscreen interface, the you know, the icon-based interface, very simple. With the X series, when we started it, a huge amount of time was spent on, you know, I can remember the meetings in R&D in terms of the grip. You know, should it be like this? Should it be like that? Huge amount of time spending to make sure that everything was where you expect it to be. We didn't want any extra bells and whistles just to make it look retro. Everything has a purpose. So quite clean and minimalist. That was the whole point behind the design. Even to the current 907, you know, it's got a basic amount of, should we say, interface controls in terms of, you know, control wheels and so on. But what's there, it's got a purpose and it works. I think, you know, just jump into Focus. We've got to approach that one. You've hit the nail there. It's familiarization. I think once you've used Focus a bit, you realize it's not quite as bad as everybody was saying. It's quite easy to get into and process your files. But we do find, you know, I always say that Focus is a fantastic raw converter. And once you've got your settings that you generally, you know, will work for you and your workflow, you can pre-program it, bring your raws in, do your conversions to, you know, 16-bit TIFFs or whatever you require, and away you go. The difference in terms of lens corrections and color between using Focus and, as you say, going to Adobe or whatever, it is huge. Unfortunately, it's massive. And so that's one of the big things, that sort of close partnership between the cameras and Focus in terms of that image processing. You know, Hasselblad took a decision very early on in terms of, look, you know, we want accurate color, that, you know, you can use one setting that we just modify for white balance in use, and it will give you correct colors out of the camera. And sure, you can go from that to make it look whatever you want, you know. So if you prefer saturated colors, etc., extra sharpness, very easy to do afterwards. But I take on board your points in terms of the bad points. And yes, the Capture One side of it is something that is screamed at us. Why can't we do it? Why can't we do it? You know, almost no week goes by without somebody saying to me, it would be great if. And you never know, that might come true in the future. It would be probably very good for both sides.
You know, I see it coming in the future as well. I don't see it always being locked out. With the separation of Capture One becoming its own company, it just makes sense. And so I'm going to knock on wood, right, that will happen. I'm not going to make any bets on what timing it is, but I'm going to bet that it will happen. Well, Chris, thank you. Thank you. That was, I I thought that you guys did a great job on your goods and greats and favorites. I'm impressed. So I'd love to introduce our talented photographers then. I think we're starting out with Mr. Loomis, right? I believe. So John, are you there?
Yes, yes, yes. Here, present.
Great. Thank you for joining us. We'd love to know a little bit about you and a little bit about your journey into Hasselblad and why you made Hasselblad your choice.
Well, you guys really gave a great foundation that's very applicable to my own career. I've been shooting for over 20 years professionally, and Hasselblad has kind of been a keystone to a lot of these different eras of my shooting. My background's more in journalism, and so I had a 501 CUM, early days as I started to move slightly away from documentary war photojournalism kind of vibes and and into more portrait-based work, a lot of editorial and advertising work. So regardless, Hasselblad has always been iconic to me, and its involvement in the space program, I think, it's always been really important to me and to a lot of people. So I'm glad you guys touched on that. My work, especially present day work, is mostly known for working with athletes and doing a lot of portraiture work and sort of pushing creative concepts a lot. So right here is a good illustration of a cover of mine that came out this year that won an American Photography Award, along with a couple other images from the same shoot. This is a female athlete who's now playing at the University of Connecticut, who was just signed by Stephen Curry, who he calls Azzy Fudd, that's her name. She will eventually be the best women's basketball player in history. So this was my creative concept for ESPN, which is a very long time client of mine, about trying to recreate something I saw in the 90s with friends of mine and some mentors of mine doing continuous lighting and then having a strobe to create motion and then stop a player.
Yeah.
So
I look at it. One of my professors, Andy David Hayes, he did something like that, and Doc Edgerton did something like that. I love your homage to them. It looks great.
Yeah, I mean, everything new is old again, and everything old comes around again. So yeah, in no way is this an original, the hot light or whatever it was back in the day. In this sense, this was, fancy continuous lighting, sort of basically movie lighting. And then my trusty strobes, as Squirrel Pack, stopping her, and we had her stopped in mid-flight. We had her stop doing a lot of different stuff. So this was a really fun project, and the Hasselblad was right there. Because of the demands I put on using cameras, Hasselblad, and before the X1D system, in terms of shooting non-portrait or shooting non-static portrait subjects, that was tricky. I mean, I grew up in the days of film, shooting color positive on everything. So it's certainly not impossible, but it is a lot harder. And so I was an early adopter in X1D system, I think when it came out in 2016, and had the cool special edition version of it, because I love the story of it. And the way they connected sort of my history in photography to a intuitive design, which to me was very akin to working with the Mamiya 7 II, which was a camera I loved, in the early 2000s. And so here we see John Cena under an underpass in Tampa, shot on a very, very, very tight deadline. That's his Ford F40 behind him, which we used for the shoot. Which he ended up getting in trouble very quickly about, because he sold it in order to pay for his wedding, which happened shortly after this. So Ford was pissed. But I shoot fast. I in the moment am responding to subjects whose time we might have on a cover assignment or on a very high pressure commercial job. We might have 45 minutes. We might have 8 minutes. And I'm going to put in 4, 6, 8 setups, and a lot of them are going to be pre-built, pre-lit, and we're going to move really fast. And what I think is very cool about the X1D system is that it is responsive to these sort of very high pressure situations. And for, a sensor, I mean, now it's, because of the way 35mm has sort of decided to explode what the sensor is and have ever smaller pixels. 50 megapixels doesn't mean much, but the 50 megapixel X1D package is really nimble and can deliver under pretty incredible circumstances, which is, John gave us a drop dead time once we got to this spot. He was taking a long time with his workout and promised us a certain amount of time, and he gave it to us, and we got everything we needed done, and then some. We actually finished with a big crew portrait. So
And how much are you using the higher shutter speeds for syncing strobe and daylight?
well, it's always a mix based on the conditions I'm being presented with, but having it there, I was someone who, I mean, I forswore the Pocket Wizard, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was, just because, talk about 200th of a second, and then depending on which, Canon or Nikon camera it was at that, whatever year we're talking about, that wasn't even clean to the point of your article, like what where are you getting banding, and then if you're using a lot of different packs at once, which a lot of my cover shoots, there's a ton of packs, then, I mean, there's just a nightmare. So knowing you have a clean up to 0.02 of a second strobe sync is a massive deal, especially when I have, professional athletes flying through the air on a lot of my shoots. So that's a huge game changer. Now you don't have to shoot it like that. You can stop things and do better blending, but knowing it's there is a big deal. This shows a kind of a range of sort of my particular sort of psychosis. If I see a really big bag of popcorn, we're totally going to use it, especially when we're photographing hilarious comedian Bert Kreischer, who is his current project you guys probably have seen is the Go Big show on Turner. This was a multimedia project we did with him during COVID. This is like rural Pennsylvania. He did a drive-in theater tour, and on the right is the often hated, sort of quite complicated but very good golfer Patrick Reed, which was a cover for Golf Digest, and another very high sort of like big concept, creative sort of original concept we did for this, which is color theory. It's been around forever, and it does cool stuff. This is just Broncolor strobes with RGB or CMYK, depending on how you want to look at it, and you can play with shapes and size and do some really cool stuff. So it's just, I think what's really important to me, especially because I work, these two pictures are illustrative of the many different kinds of lighting conditions I work in, especially when I'm wearing the hat of an editorial photographer. Hasselblad handles all of those and the mixing of those really, really well. I would be remiss not to finish by saying, as a professional shooter who really cares about Hasselblad, and apparently I have a ton of Swedish things in my photographic light in general, you got to either integrate with Adobe and Capture One finally better, or focus on the Mac or on your system has to be a lot more robust, because the adding steps in the process just drives us all crazy. It just doesn't make any sense when they're not additive to quality. I think focus is the best raw processing thing to do with X1D, but if that's all I'm doing and doing a rename, it doesn't make any sense. So play nice or build the thing we need. Pick one. I don't care which one, but let's move into the future on that, so we can better utilize the camera.
John, we love your work. Absolutely love your work.
Thank you very much.
The control of the light is, I mean, as a technical person myself, I see your work and it speaks to me. So I appreciate you greatly. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Right. I think our next client is Mr. Bekker, I believe, here in Atlanta. Phil, are you there? Are you off of mute? There he is. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
Hey, Phil.
Phil, I feel like you've got a story to tell us about your journey in Hasselblad. I know that one's not your first Hasselblad that you've got on your P there. So tell us about your journey to Hasselblad. I want to know.
Well, I studied in South Africa first, and then I went to England and did a postgraduate, and then I couldn't stay in England legally because there were sanctions against Rhodesia. So I went back to South Africa and I did a postgraduate there as well. And actually, not having a lot of funds, I actually bought a Rolly from the school, which the head of department just didn't like. Anyway, so I started off with a Rolly SL66 system, which I still have the whole lot, just can't bear it. Anyway, and then I was shooting commercially, and I was doing quite a few interiors. I got hold of an SWC, which was just stunning, it was really good for a lot of the work that I did. And then after a few years, I immigrated to the United States, and again, immigration lawyers' fees were like outrageous, and I had to just come up with the funds, and it was either break up the Rolly system or sell the one Hasselblad that I had. So I had to sell the SWC, which I still regret to this day. So that was the start with Hasselblad. And
What
obviously,
year was that? Phil, when did you immigrate?
86, I arrived here.
86.
And then I was using various cameras, in between. And then when the X1D was coming out, I was keeping an eye on it, and I borrowed it a lot of times and tested a lot of the lenses. In fact, this is how this came around. And thought I'd wait because I really thought they're going to come out with 100 megapixels. So I waited. And eventually I thought, okay, well, I just have to get the X1D too because the 100 isn't going to happen. And of course I did, and I'm glad I waited. And I can see why now the 100 couldn't have worked in that package. But I'm just so happy with it. I mean, I was thinking I've probably used almost every medium format camera system except the East German Praktika and whatever the Soviets might have made. And this, apart, John alluded to the Mimir 7, and I never owned one, but I borrowed one, which was a stunning camera, really good quality. And the Hasselblad, the X1D2, is like that. It's the nicest. I'm not going to go through what everybody else has said because I'm just reiterating that. But it's for me at this stage, it's the nicest camera to have. It's tiny. I mean, it's so tiny, it's unbelievable, and the quality is just perfect. So I couldn't really think of having a bigger camera. It wouldn't really work for me. So that's where I am.
as Phil has it on his CNRP 4x5, right? Which is
well, I read about this and I thought, let me try it. When I was still testing the X1D, so I bought this photodiodes adapter and I popped it on here, and it's so great, because to be able to do this much reverse shine flow with cameras that I already had and a whole bunch of lenses that I already had, it's a little bit cumbersome, but it's great when you want to use it. It's
well,
really good.
The funny thing is, I talked about marrying the old with the new, and you've got it right there, right? You're doing the same exact what I said was making me happy.
Yeah, so I don't use it much. If I need it, it's there,
I'd love to see some of your images. I see some of Phil's images. Ah, beautiful.
Okay, so I'll just explain quickly. The one on the left, I really take the camera with me wherever I go. And that was to a furniture store. And I just love those shapes. I mean, really, every time you go anywhere, you have to see stuff because there's so much to see. So there was all those negative and positive shapes, and I really kind of like dark tones. So I shot that, and I liked it that there was only a little bit of highlight. And then I got back and I looked at it and I thought it really needs something there, So when I was doing my MFA, I shot that vintage plane and hanging in some museum up north somewhere. And I thought that would be good to drop that in. So that's the story behind that one. And that's just become a finalist in the Graphis photo competition along with the one next to it. And the one next to it was, I came out of a pet store, and those 3 pots were there actually last winter or the winter before. And I went back, I only have the 45 f3.5. but I did manage to get hold of some HC lenses. And when I went back to shoot that with the it was the 45 XCD, or it just wasn't wide enough, and I didn't get enough perspective. So I used the 28 HC on that shot. And well, I really want to get a 21 at some stage, but that's good for them at the moment. It's really good. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, I've tried to just show a variety of images. I think the one on the right was probably done on the sonar. This is to go with part of my food portfolio. And again, I just wanted minimal depth of field. And I really like those meringues, which I found in an English store. So I bought a whole bunch and then just got props to go with it, and used tungsten lighting. I mean, I've got tons of broncolor, but I kind of like using tungsten. So I've got all my broncolor, and I've got 1/300 ARRI and mirrors, and that's really all I need for a lot of the stuff. Okay, next one, and let's take questions. This was when I was still testing. Oh, just before I bought, actually, and I borrowed the 21 from you guys, and it was early in the morning, and my wife said, "Oh, look at this! Look at the mist!" So, and I thought, I didn't really want to rush down to the lake, but I had to return the camera that morning. So I ran down there, and typically I would always shoot on a tripod, just so I have the quality if I want to go really big for galleries. So I just really love the shot. Again, too, I like all those dark tones, and the range that X1D2 gives is just unbelievable, and it's pretty sharp for handheld too. This one, the one on the left, I was just actually sitting on the couch, and we had this lemon tree, and I was kind of looking through the leaves, and then I really liked those shapes, and I wanted some movement. So I just like hunkered down on the couch and then focused on the skylight and adjusted the speed until it worked for that amount of movement. And that was it for that shot. And then the next one, no, sorry, yeah, that one on the right, I came out of the supermarket, and this was just around the corner, and I thought, oh, I can't believe that, all those shapes. So I shot it, I didn't have the camera with me, but I shot it on my iPhone, and then went back, I noted the time of the day, and went back with the X1D, and was lying all over the floor and carrying on, and did the whole series, and that's the one I used. But I really like what happens with that dynamic range and being able to get that shadow detail, you know, it's stunning. And I did burn down the sign because I didn't want too much information there.
Phil, you take, well, I believe you're one of those photographers that always has his camera on him. Is that a bad assumption on my end?
Say that again, Dave, sorry?
I feel like you're one of those photographers that always has his camera on him, because I see that you just see differently than everyone else. And I see that you're shooting, to me, what I feel like you're shooting all the time and seeing new imagery pop up. So I appreciate that.
If I don't take it with me, I find something which I know will never be there again. And it's just like, you know, I can do it on the iPhone, but I only have a 6S and it's not very good. So yeah, it's just, I really want to take it everywhere all the time. And it being so light, it's great. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why the XCD, you know, that's why the X1D works perfectly for you, right? It's small, it's light, and it's something that's very easy to take with you everywhere. So I see that fitting your personality perfectly.
Yeah. And then this one was also with the XCD when I was testing that back in the day, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And I tried the 21 had just come out. So I thought I'd just do a quick test of available light. So I just went into the bathroom and then took a shot, and then there's no lighting. I mean, I've done really nice shots of that with broad strobes, but it's just amazing what you can get out of it, you know. So yeah, I would highly recommend that to anybody. Thank you.
Do you have a favorite lens?
Well, it's only the only the 45 because that's all I own in terms of that lens. I really like the 25. I mean, sorry, the 21. And I would really be interested in maybe the 80 down the line as well, just because I do a lot of wide angle stuff which suits what I'm trying to shoot. But I think it would be nice to have that option of the 80. I also have the HD 210 and the 300, and they're really nice, but just like a sod to focus. You've got to be really careful. And I was talking to Steve about it, and we found that you have to get the shimmer factor. So you have to wait till it shimmers, because I don't like focus peaking. So when it shimmers, you've got it, in the back.
Shimmers. That's great.
So,
well, Phil, we appreciate you greatly. We love your work, Phil. I mean,
yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
Years over and over again. Love what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have to thank you for waiting so long. Antonio in Miami, are you ready to join us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
I'd love to hear your story, Antonio, and I loved seeing all the HC glass.
Well, yeah, I just happened to be in a shoot down in Miami. I'm doing a food shoot, so I just had it all laid out perfectly. So that played out well. So the first Hasselblad I ever owned was this H4D60, which was the first full frame camera that you guys made, well, the Hasselblad made, that had a 54 millimeter, because the H3D, the biggest sensor they had was 48. That was the 39 megapixel. It was a 38. So this was the one that played well, because back then most of my work was architectural. So that allowed me to use a 35 millimeter lens, and it played well with what I was doing. And the other reasons why I started using Hasselblad was obviously the lenses. These lenses had fantastic chromatic aberration correction. I mean, not correction, but I mean, right out of the bat, they didn't have any chromatic aberrations. And when you shifted doing architectural work, the barrel distortion on the cameras and lenses that was available back then, before 2010, was in the 35 millimeter cameras, was not very good. And these lenses were just fantastic, and the ability to use the HTS 1.5 with the 24 millimeter lens that came out a little later was just fantastic. Because one thing about the focus software is that it communicates with the HTS. So one thing, if you're using the a 24 millimeter TS on and you're not shifting, any camera manufacturer, like any software like Lightroom, can correct it right away. But if you're shifting, the barrel distortion just gets ridiculous. And what I mean by that is if you have a building, that's when the building starts looking like a V shape, even if you're leveled. So focus communicates with the HTS and knows where you are in the shift, and knows what lens you're using, and it corrects it perfectly on the software, which is great. So that's what the reasons that I joined. And well, obviously this camera had its drawbacks. It had a CCD sensor, so anything above 200 ISO was questionable quality. But then when Hasselblad came out with the H5D, this is the H6D 100, but this now has a CMOS sensor, which you can push the ISO up to 1600 and have no problems. So my lighting equipment just got reduced in half now, because now I can shoot. My work is more focused on hospitality, so hotels. So most of the architectural work requires a lot of lighting, especially if you're using ISO 100. But now that you can pump the ISO to 800 of ISO 800, you can you know, you can do a lot with smaller lighting equipment. Hello?
Yes, we're here.
Okay. So that was a shot taken in Beijing as a hotel called the Eclat Hotel. It's the hotel with the biggest private art collection. Everything in there is just an art. It's just, you see the I don't know if you can see it in the computer, but the ceiling is just fish made by an artist, famous artist. It's got the biggest private Dali collection. So basically it's a museum. That was back in 2016. And
is that with the HTS 1.5 as well, Antonio?
I don't think I used I didn't think I shift there. I think that's a 35 millimeters straight without the shifting. The thing is that I only use this when I need to, because it does require, it stops down the light. I think about one stop. So I use it when I need it only. And that's probably exteriors mostly.
Antonio, did you have a history with Hasselblad before you got into the H system, or how did you get to that point?
I didn't. That was my first. I did a book on Cartagena. When I started printing my work, I started noticing the chromatic aberrations on the prints when I shifted towards the edge of the lens, and that just made me start searching for what the problem was. And then that's why I landed into this camera, which is, I think I got into about 2010. So I did not have a history. I've only been shooting for about 17 years, but compared to like 35 or like that. So not that long. So I started straight into digital. I never shot professionally film. And I shot only architectural work before 2010, and after 2010, since I started focusing on hospitality hotels, then I started moving into food and lifestyle. So this camera came in very handy when I'm shooting lifestyle as well, because it's very fast. Well, a lot faster than the older one. That's a picture I took in Ireland. Again, broncolor lighting, gels, the colors just came up beautiful in this camera.
You know, we really planned that all three photographers were broncolor
Oh, so
photographers as well.
all of you
No,
broncolor.
every
Yeah.
single one. I wonder what that says. That's tremendous. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's a Christmas promo for a hotel called Lyra. That's a Mandarin Oriental hotel in Washington, DC. Again, the ability, those large files. I mean, if you can't zoom in there, but if I can zoom in and just pick on clean skin on any of those models, so that's and the ability to crop. See, if a client doesn't wants a tighter shot of that, he can perfectly crop half the picture and still have a 50 megapixel shot, which is bigger than any other camera out there.
Yeah, great point. When you're shooting 100 megapixel and you're shooting that, first of all, we'll go back to one of the points you made, right? When you're shooting that large physical sensor, people don't understand the angle of view and how angle of view matters, right? And when you have the largest sensor possible in the back, how much more of an angle of view you have than you have for the competitor. So that's a great point that people don't realize and don't think about, why that 100 megapixel or more sensor is important.
Yes, one of the things I used to do when I shot 35 millimeter architectural, I wanted to get a wide shot. Instead of using the 24, to your point, I used to use a 35 and just move the camera, so I didn't have that distortion at that point. So when I got the bigger sensor, I can use the same 35 and now have half my workload just got cut in half, because I could just all get in one shot. Mm-hmm. So that's to your point.
Yep. And the second point you said is that if I need to repurpose, or if I make a creative decision later that I want to crop in a little bit more, you've got all that detail to crop in if you want to, or if the client wants to, right? Because
Correct, yeah.
that's not in your control. Then the client then says, I want a little bit closer here after the fact and changing their mind. Having all that resolution up front gives you that ability.
Especially if you're shooting food. Sometimes in food, the client does all these additional crops for marketing purposes, and now for social media and all this. So that's great to have that ability as well. That other picture you saw was a hotel in the UK. That's the real sky, by the way. That's not. It looks like it's superimposed, but just the sunsets in the UK are just fantastic in the fall. That was about 5 years ago. I shot that one.
Beautiful.
And that's a composite. Although there is a drawback having large files. I mean, that when you're shooting 100 megapixel at a 16 bits, that's probably like a 40 or 60 image composite because of lighting composite. So you really need a big computer for that. You can't, a laptop won't do it. Well, maybe now the laptops are really professional, are really robust, but back then you need to use a Mac Pro to handle a file like that with 50, 60 images stacked on top of each other at 100 megapixel. That was a big file. That's a restaurant called Barton G. They do very interesting stuff with the they have all these vehicles where they present the food in interesting ways, and so that was a fun shoot. Just I use a lot of gels. I've been experimenting with a lot of color gels, so light streaks in the food to make things interesting, and that's one of the things I did in that picture.
Gorgeous, absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Thank you.
Guys, you picking out our clients tonight. You guys did a great job, right? And the talent that we have. It shows both the talent that Hasselblad brings to the table, but also that you guys brought in. Amazing. Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Let's ask a few more questions and hit Chris while he's here. I think we have a few things to still ask. Chris, is there 100 megapixel coming out and X1D? Can you put 100 megapixel in that body?
Yeah. So yes, you can. You can put 100 megapixel in that sized body. It's a lot of work. A lot of in terms of controlling heat is the biggest issue with that. But yes, it can be done.
And it's going to be out when?
Yeah, I would love to be able to tell you, but yeah, obviously, we're always working on that next gen camera. As I said earlier on, we started off 2016 when we launched the H6D, we launched the X1D, and that system was brand new then in terms of X. We've been adding to that, and to take Steve's point in terms of the EVF, each incarnation of the camera gets, if you like, the latest EVFs that are available at that point, because when you're designing a system, you've got to draw a line somewhere as to what's going into it. And typically you'll decide on X and 3 months later on, somebody will bring out a new one. But in terms of components, yeah, we don't just update and jig the cameras around just for the sake of it. We will work on what needs to be done, listen very carefully to the feedback, and to take some of the points. Huge amount of information comes back direct from customers in terms of, look, guys, this is what we really need in this system, and stabilization has been fed back, upgraded EVF, refresh rates, and so on. And with just the 2 incarnations we've had, we've tried to deal with some of those in terms of system times, usability, reaction times, and so on. And so we try to cross off as many each time we bring out that new model. And so yes, of course, we're working on the next generation of camera to come out, and we will try to incorporate as many of these new technologies into that camera as is possible, whilst keeping the price competitive. And I think that's the thing. But the main design principle and the image quality is what we start from. That's, you know, if we add this feature, will it enhance the system? It's got to be worth adding. We won't just put it on for the sake of it. So I think you'll see that, and the same as we've done with the 907 and the CFE back. If you look back at earlier incarnations of the CFEs, bit by bit, we add in the latest technology so that the current version, you know, you've got that touch interface, tilt screen, USB. You know, the internal battery was a big change for this particular design, which just made it look a lot cleaner, a lot simpler. So we try to do that as we move through the next version as they come through. Yes, put new technology in, but there's some constraints we try to keep in there in terms of look and feel, usability, and so on.
And since you brought it up, since the 907 is great exactly the way it is, except for if we took that 52C out and sold it by itself, are you going to be able to sell the back by itself without the interface on front? Is that going to happen like it did the version before?
It's something that's been asked for a lot, I'll be honest with you. But the actual cost when you split it down, by selling it as a dual use unit, that's how we've seen it. By selling you the 907 and the CFE back, effectively, you've got a whole camera system there, which you can then use the back on your VC. You're getting 2 for 1. So I think at the moment, we probably are not going to offer the CFE as a standalone back without the 907. To us, you're buying a 907 camera, and it just so happens you can take the back off. In the same way as the H6, you buy it as a whole camera to start with, and if you want to use the back on something else, you can. So at the moment, this is where we are. It's unlikely to be sold.
It's good to get the official answer. That's what we were just trying to do. The official answer is that. And honestly, as a 500 user, I didn't think I'd like the front end as much as I do, right? And I find myself going back to it and using it, going, oh wait, okay, my widest is only a 60, or my widest is only maybe a 50 on my 500 series, but now I can go to the 21, now I can go to the 45, now I can go on the front end. So it does open doors, and it maybe forces the client to play with it and go, wow, this makes sense. So it's not a bad answer. So I do understand.
Yeah, I think also, if you pair it up with the 45p, the smallest and lightest lens we do for XCDs, that is a tiny system with a high quality lens that there's not a huge amount of extra weight compared to the digital back on its own. So, yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Guys, want any more questions on your end?
I had a question, Chris, on I don't know if you can answer it or not, but we still sell the Hasselblad H system. Don't sell it as frequently as we used to. We sell more X1Ds, 907Xs, but there hasn't been new product development in a good 5 years, I guess I'd say. Is there going to be more development on that system, or what do you see there?
I think, H system is still current in terms of the 100 megapixel chip. For us, it's the only camera we have with that large 53 by 40 chip size. And there's a lot of customers out there that still want that larger chip. Obviously, that particular chip design has some limitations in terms of autofocus speeds and the platform itself on the H6 in terms of what we can do to with the current platform to move it forward. If you like, that's been the benefit, I suppose, of the X platform, that it was a brand new platform. There was no limits as what we could do. So we started, if you like, from fresh, and then designed a system to do X, Y, and Z. So obviously, H system itself, we still offer it. It's still our professional product, modular product, and that's a big thing. We here in the UK, we've got a few of the architectural photographers that we work with, and that H60 100 megapixel back on a Linhof or equivalent Cambo, etc. It's a fantastic thing. Again, you've got that larger sensor, and with the rod and stock lenses and so on, the quality is amazing. And again, all of the movements.
If we had to put our vote in there, we're putting our vote in for the 150 bucks that illuminated, though, if you could. So I was like, if you could take that sensor and put it in there, it'd be a wonderful next step.
Well, I can definitely feed that back in. I mean, I must admit, it has been fed back an awful lot. That, you know, guys, it would be fantastic if we could have this sensor. You know, we like all the advantages that the 150 sensor has. Can it be done? In the same way that, you know, the new 144 by 33 sensor has a lot of advantages in terms over the current 50 with, you know, the phase detection points and so on. So as technology's moved along, a lot of these extra functionalities, if you like, come built into the sensor, which is great. But then really to get the best out of them, you then need a whole new platform and so on. So it operates fully. And so that's all the decisions that are sort of going on to say, right, if we put this in there, what could we do with it? What would be required by everybody? What would new things would we need to add to the system to do it? And how quickly could we do that?
Chris, if I may, in the chat in the room, there's several questions, people asking for XCD roadmap from the lens standpoint. If there was anything on the horizon you could share.
So each lens, each year we've added more focal lengths to the XCD range to try and build it up. I think, you know, we've now got the 21 mil in terms of the wide angle, so we've hit that end. I think the 135 pretty much is at the top end. We've had a reasonable amount of feedback for a sort of a portrait zoom, but much more we want a wide angle zoom. Seems to be the request there as well. The other main item that we've had a lot of feedback for and requests for that's been fed back to the development team is for tilt shift. Currently, obviously, in terms of movements, yes, you can use the H lenses with the HTS via the probably the best one is the 0.8 converter onto the X system, and that way you can actually access tilt shift. Or as Phil does, you know, mount it onto a tech cam, you can do that. But there's been a lot of requests for dedicated tilt shift XCD lenses. So that's been fed back. I think, yes, you will see a lot more lenses coming out over the next few years to build that system, because we're still not there yet. We still got a good range, but there's a few gaps and we want to fill in those. So yes, you will see more lenses come through for that. Unfortunately, I can't.
Give up. Yep.
Darn it, so close.
Anything else, guys, for Chris?
I had one quick question.
One last
Chris.
question?
Yeah, because I know we're up against it, but so there's a 135 millimeter lens, right? And there's a 1.7x teleconverter. And the only way that you can buy that teleconverter is at the same time you buy that lens. And some people don't know this, so I've got to tell our clients that, hey, if you're buying that lens and you would ever want that, buy it now.
Right.
And so my question, it's curious to me why that is. If you have an answer, like why not allow someone to buy that 1.7 separately instead of right at the beginning?
Yeah, and I wish I could give you a valid reason. Basically, they designed both to come through as a standalone and with the kit, and really it should have either been just the one or as a spare, you know, as an option to buy that plus that. Currently, we have the two in the system. We have asked many times, look, we want to have the 1.7 as a separate SKU so that people can buy that way. There are a lot of requests for that in the system. At this point, however, there's no plan to change the current arrangement. I can't say anything other than that, I'm afraid. There's sorry.
Well, we appreciate all that you've said already. So trust me, I think it's time to wrap up, guys. To me, on my wrap up or my roundup here, what I see is a company constantly reinventing themselves. right? Constantly reinvented from, from the history that you said, but from 500 series that everybody was the gold standard in medium format, to then reinventing themselves to 645, and then taking over the 645 market and saying we're the dominant 645 product. And then all out of the blue, they come through with a mirrorless and a 907 that just is a constant reinventing of quality. And that's what I would round up my feeling of Hasselblad to me.
I feel like this company is, a lot of attention is paid to the, over the years, a couple things. There's this big deal with Victor Hasselblad. I mean, he just towers over this company, and he's gone as a person. The company lives on, but there's a lot of attention paid to like the various ownership situations over the years that have evolved. And I don't feel that that's really all that important. What's important, and what I think Hasselblad's done a great job of, is continuing to evolve and produce great products. And that's really what I think people should focus on.
That's a great point.
Just, okay, Victor Hasselblad does not own this company anymore, and it's whatever company owns them, has a majority stake, or whatever you want to say. Focus on the products and try them out and see what you think of them.
Yeah, without any need for legacy, I love this camera. I love working with it. I wasn't a Hasselblad shooter in the past. I never shot this camera. I never shot a 500 series commercially or for personal use. But I did shoot the Age. But the love came in, more recently, that this is just a really extraordinary camera system, and the new glass they built for this system is fantastic. Feels good, has that kind of leaded glass feel, like woo, and there's some optics, and the resolving power is fantastic. I'm not sure what they're engineered up to, but you definitely are not coming close to seeing the edge of them under resolving. So it's really good stuff.
Well, that is our roundup for Hasselblad. That is the end of our medium format experience. Chris, thank you so much for spending the time with the major time change and joining us tonight. We appreciate. It doesn't seem like you're. Is it midnight? Probably. What is it?
1 a.m. But thank you very much for But thanks very much for inviting me. It's been good. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks,
For
Chris.
our talented photographers, John and Phil and Antonio, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for sharing your imagery. Thank you for sharing your journey, and thank you for your patronage, right? For your support and your business. We appreciate you guys greatly. Thank you.
My pleasure. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, and all of those that have stayed, or that you've even been to every single one of our medium format experiences, all four, we can't do this without you guys. And so you are the reason we're here and allow us to do what we do. So we appreciate you greatly, and thank you for tuning in, and we're gonna go have a drink. So, good night, guys. Happy holidays. Take care.